Sheriff Nanos is still not saying that those people are ruled out or that anybody is ruled out. Listen to what he said to Ford Hatchett, the reporter from ABC 15.
The two folks we saw detained in February, have they been completely ruled out at this point?
Nobody's completely ruled out. What it is, we took information, developed it for a warrant from a judge, a magistrate, and we served that warrant. All the information we gathered is gathered, and because we didn't make an arrest or we released some people, doesn't mean they're cleared. It just means that we don't have enough now to hold you. We don't have it.
6 months into a missing person investigation, the sheriff looks directly into a camera and issues a statement that does precisely the opposite of closing a case. He opens it wide. Nobody's completely ruled out. That is a direct quote from Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos in a recent interview. That specific phrasing is not standard law enforcement boilerplate. It is a signal. It carries weight precisely because it is so imprecise. A cleared suspect gives detectives a smaller haystack. An uncleared suspect population turns the entire county into the haystack. Today, we are not examining the disappearance itself. We are examining the official language surrounding it, the legal documents filed in response, and the quiet war happening between a department's narrative and the sworn claims of the people it detained. Think of a door frame in a home in Rio Rico, splintered inward by a tactical team, the wood still raw 6 months later, no charges filed, the frame never repaired. That door frame is the central piece of evidence in a counter investigation now playing out in civil court.
The courts get to tell us that, and we release them, release their property back, but the evidence we've obtained, who knows, maybe a day from now, a month from now, a year from now, somebody might call in and say, oh, you missed this. And guess what? We'll go back. So, yeah.
Are you still actively looking into those individuals, or?
No, I wouldn't talk about that. Yeah, I can't talk about that.
Sheriff Nanos was explicit. The absence of an arrest does not equal an absence of suspicion. When asked directly whether two men who were publicly detained and released were cleared, he said, quote, "Nobody's completely ruled out. It just means that we don't have enough now to hold you." That is a legally defensible statement. It is also a potentially devastating one for the individuals named. It creates a permanent asterisk. The sheriff then pivoted to a hypothetical, suggesting that a future phone call could reanimate the investigation. He placed the entire case in a state of suspended animation. Where the evidence exists, the suspicion remains, but no formal charge allows for a formal defense. The paperwork already knew.
I was saying this, Carlos Palazuelos, who is the man who was detained in Rio Rico, the first man who was detained, has actually, I remember his I think it was his mother-in-law, Josefina, who I interviewed out there when I raced out there that night when there was this bust out there. He has now filed, or has a notice of claim, which is basically saying he's going to file a lawsuit. And I'm going to go through that in a second. But before I do, I want to tell you that there were search warrants that were taken out to...
Within days of that interview, the counter-narrative arrived not in a press conference, but in a legal document filed by one of those detainees, Carlos Palazuelos. His attorney filed a notice of claim against Pima County, a mandatory precursor to a lawsuit that outlines, in specific detail, what the department did on February 10, 2026. We still do not know what evidence the department presented to get the original search warrant. The affidavits remain sealed under court order. What we have now is the response, an allegation that the entire operation was built on what the claim describes as false and baseless evidence.
Carlos, this is the Rio Rico one. So notice of claim, he is planning to sue now the Pima County Sheriff's Office. And he said, this is from his lawyer, and I'm going to play for you a little bit of what his lawyer told me in a second. But they're basically saying that on February 10th, 2026, there was a wrongful arrest and seizure of Carlos Palazuelos and Daniel Maddox and the search of their family property that resulted in significant property damage. Remember, they went through the house, they got the cell phones, they were I think they tore down a couple of doors, that kind of thing. It says on February 10th, 2026, deputies of the Pima County Sheriff's Office arrested Carlos at gunpoint and held him without probable cause for approximately 7 to 8 hours. Carlos's arrest was made in a public fashion and that intended to damage Carlos's reputation and subject him.
The claim states that deputies arrested Carlos at gunpoint and held him for approximately 7 to 8 hours without probable cause. It argues the arrest was made in a public fashion intended to damage his reputation and subject him to humiliation. These are not rhetorical accusations. These are specific legal filings that will require a factual response in court. It further alleges that deputies entered the home, removed another individual, placed him in handcuffs, and ransacked the residence, causing significant property damage. The claim then introduces a motive we rarely see alleged so bluntly in official filings. That the department carried out this operation in a misguided attempt to shield itself and Sheriff Nanos from criticism and to boost the sheriff's public profile.
In this improper fashion, in a misguided attempt to shield itself and Sheriff Nanos from criticism related to their handling of the case and to boost Sheriff Nanos' public profile, it says. While Carlos was being unlawfully held, the PCSD removed Daniel from the home, placed him in handcuffs, and invaded and ransacked the family home, causing significant property damage. Carlos's arrest and the search of his home were the result of a secret warrant application, and it was secret because we still don't know what it said. Based on false and baseless evidence, at all times the PCSD lacked probable cause to believe that Carlos had committed any crime, and we don't know of any probable cause. Rather than clear Carlos and admit its mistakes, Sheriff Nanos and the PCSD remained silent in a manner that...
Let that allegation sit for a moment. A legal document now asserts that the primary driver of a law enforcement operation was not a genuine belief in probable cause, but institutional self-preservation and reputation management. The claim points to a specific action as evidence Sheriff Nanos' own social media post on the day of the detention. He publicly announced that a subject was being questioned in connection to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. The claim argues that this announcement, combined with the silent failure to ever clear Carlos afterward, was designed to leave a permanent cloud of suspicion over an innocent man. The department, the filing says, chose silence knowing it would irreparably damage a reputation.
Nanos, like I just played, saying that they haven't ruled anybody out still when asked specifically about Carlos and Luke Daly. It says this letter is a notice of claim. So basically they're saying that they plan to sue the Pima County Sheriff's Office. And then they go through the factual background. Carlos is an innocent man. He has no knowledge of or involvement in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, nor has Carlos ever taken any action or made any statements that could lead to a reasonable person to believe that he had any knowledge of or was involved in the disappearance. Nevertheless, on February 10th, 2026, Detective Earl Guerin and another PCSD employee or employees obtained a search warrant.
And then came the interview. The sheriff, asked directly about Carlos, and the second detainee, refused to rule them out. The legal claim had already accused the department of remaining silent to avoid admitting a mistake. Now the sheriff was not silent. He was speaking, and the words he chose amplified the exact harm the claim describes. Carlos's attorney has now asked for damages in the millions, $2.5 million for his client alone, plus additional amounts for the family members who were present when the tactical team entered. The case is now running on two entirely separate but intersecting tracks. The criminal investigation for Nancy Guthrie remains active, the DNA testing continues, the genetic genealogy work is ongoing, but has not yet identified a suspect. And parallel to that, a civil case is building that argues the pursuit of that investigation ran straight through one man's front door without sufficient cause.
Radar.
Do you have any idea? I mean, based on what they were asking Carlos, have you been able to sort of piece together why they thought he was involved?
I don't think they had any reason to think he was involved. My belief is that it's most like this is his arrest, his unlawful detention, the search of his residence, his property, the seizure of his property, probably all goes to some electronic evidence that's really dubious. Something like cell phone pings, something like flock cameras. He's a delivery driver. I don't know that he was ever even in that area. And I think it's widely known by law enforcement that things like cell phone pings are incredibly inaccurate. They're very, very dependent on a lot of factors. And so I suspect that it's probably some combination of that.
So what could have put Carlos on the department's radar in the first place? His attorney offered a theory to Brian that warrants close attention, not because it is proven, but because it points to a specific category of evidence we have seen in other cases that unravel. He said he believes the case probably goes back to electronic evidence that is really dubious, something like cell phone pings or flock camera data. He noted Carlos is a delivery driver and stated he does not know that his client was ever even in the area. The attorney then said something crucial. It is widely known by law enforcement that things like cell phone pings are incredibly inaccurate. He speculated the department might have used surveillance software to cross reference vague data with demographic profiles, triangulating suspicion rather than identifying a suspect.
That they use to cross-reference their own databases. So it's like intelligence gathering software. The military uses it. The FBI uses it. A lot of police agencies use it. And, it allows them to try to triangulate things. So they might be, I'm way out on a limb speculating right now, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if, they had some dubious cell phone ping, some really vague description of a vehicle, like a silver vehicle, and then they just cross-referenced it with Hispanic people who lived in Tucson or something like that.
He named a specific software suite used by military and law enforcement to cross-reference databases. The implication was stark. An automated system may have flagged a delivery driver's phone, and that flag became the basis for a tactical raid. We do not have the search warrant, so we cannot verify this. But the broader question is now unavoidable. In a case with immense public pressure, did the investigative process invert? Did the pressure to produce a suspect generate the suspect, rather than the evidence generating the lead? The paperwork already knew.
Did it this way. Listen to what he told me. Do you have any idea why they chose Luke and his mom in that house and the car?
I do not. And obviously we're very, very curious to see this affidavit, but I don't. And Luke does not either, nor does his mom.
The other man, Carlos, we interviewed his lawyer, the one who is from Rio Rico, kind of a similar situation.
Right.
And, he was a delivery driver, and his lawyer thought maybe like he had been in that area, maybe, just with the geofencing, that may have connected him to that area. Do you think it's this, did they say if they drove through that area, your clients?
It would be rank speculation on my part. I have no clue what undergirded it. We were speculating that maybe some confidential source threw his name out there for some reason. We have no idea. But as far as we're concerned, it was completely baseless, and is going nowhere. And as this storm of media and this beast that needs to be fed passes, with Iran happening now and other stories taking primary position, the problem is that you still have the sort of destruction of people's lives in the wake of this story.
The second detained individual, Luke Daly, whose home was raided in an operation that involved a heavy FBI presence, has a lawyer who gave an equally telling response. When asked if he had any idea why his client and his mother were targeted, the lawyer said simply, "I do not." He stated that as far as they are concerned, it was completely baseless. He then described something haunting. The media storm moves on. Other national stories take over. But the people left behind are picking up the pieces, literally, of their home, which was destroyed during the search warrant execution.
So again, he said that nobody is ruled out as of now, which is not something that I've heard him say with that sort of language. And pretty much a couple of days, right around the same time that you have Sheriff Nanos saying this, Carlos Palazuelos, who is the man who was detained in Rio Rico, the first man who was detained, has actually, I remember his I think it was his mother-in-law, Josephina, who I interviewed out there when I raced out there that night when there was this bust out there. He has now filed, or has a notice of claim, which is basically saying he's going to file a lawsuit. And I'm going to go through that in a second. But before I do, I want to tell you that there were search warrants that were taken out to conduct these raids. The one in Rio Rico and the one with Luke Daly is his name, the guy whose house was raided in.
This is the crux of the counter narrative. The state has the power to swing a hammer. When it swings and misses, the crater remains. The sheriff's language, nobody's completely ruled out, ensures the crater is never filled. It leaves a permanent shadow on a doorstep. And yet, these two men, their families, their destroyed doors and seized phones, are currently the only concrete legal outcomes of this investigation at the 6-month mark.
Story that moves on imminently and inevitably, but the Dalys are left picking up the pieces literally of their home, which was destroyed in the search warrant.
So we'll see how all this plays out with the two of them, the lawsuit from Carlos. It's interesting that the sheriff said that again, though, in that interview with ABC 15. That really, really struck me. So I'll stay on top of that. I mentioned that it's now the 6-month mark, pretty much the 6-month mark of when Nancy vanished. They did put out an official statement, the Pima County Sheriff's Office. They said the Guthrie investigation remains active and ongoing. A task force of investigators from the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI remain committed to finding Nancy and providing answers to her family. The analysis of DNA and digital evidence has been underway for the past 6 months. This work is complex and time-intensive, but investigators continue to pursue.
Let us pivot to the broader investigative context, because the sheriff's defiant posture exists alongside a case that has not yet broken open. The Pima County Sheriff's Office released an official 6-month statement. It noted the task force remains committed, that DNA and digital evidence analysis is complex and time-intensive, and that investigators continue to pursue every credible lead. The statement quoted Savannah Guthrie directly. It is never too late to do the right thing.
That sort of fell by the wayside. That might have been useful, but I think in terms of just an investigation as they normally go, I'm actually not surprised that we're here.
What are those windows that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, for example, as we've discussed previously, these two ransom notes, although the second one isn't really a ransom note, that Savannah herself believes are real, do suggest to me two different people who are perhaps experiencing some kind of rupture in terms of their attitude about what happened. And I think that could have been milked by law enforcement in terms of going live and appealing to the author of the we didn't know she had a heart condition note, because whoever that person is, I think, was experiencing a desire to distance herself. I still think that was a she, herself, emotionally.
That line is not generic. It was a targeted appeal, and criminologist Dr. Gary Brucato, who has closely followed the case, believes it represents a strategic attempt to rupture the psychology of those responsible. Dr. Brucato has maintained a consistent theory that multiple individuals with distinct psychological profiles are involved. He pointed to the two ransom notes as the foundational evidence. The first note was aggressive and mechanical. The second note, written later, was sympathetic, emotional, and in Dr. Brucato's analysis, completely undermined the purpose of the first note by saying the victim had a medical condition.
Obviously, in the second note, which was more sympathetic, are different people.
Yes, I believe that there are at least three psychologies involved. Porch guy, who I do not think wrote either of those notes, who I think is clear was some sort of goon that was just sort of put there to give the impression of a totally outside agent, who never met this woman, who came in to do this and to do the dirty work, to do the, and who I think looks like he's, had a run-in or two with the law before, perhaps even drugs, and comes across as really quite a cool-headed character under pressure, because I don't think this is his first rodeo with doing something nasty. But the other two characters, the one who wrote that first note, which is demanding the money, who's, I think...
He identifies at least three psychologies in the case. One, the individual seen on the porch camera, someone he describes as a cool-headed goon, a person likely hired to do the physical work and unconcerned with consequences. Two, the author of the first note, someone scheming, manipulative, focused entirely on financial extraction. And three, the author of the second note, someone who knows Savannah or feels genuine emotional connection, someone who is likely now tormented by fear or guilt. Dr. Brucato argues the second note was a profound mistake for the group. It was a crack in their unity.
When I look at that note, the one that was written with the modicum of sympathy and the distancing, it seems to me that a risk was taken in writing that, because it would have been written from the same place that the first one was written. But the first one is demanding money, and the second one is undoing the ability of the first person to get money, which suggests to me that the first person would have been kind of mad that the second person wrote the note. So why would they do it? Why would they take that risk? So there's something going on in that dynamic that's causing a rupture, and yet for some reason no one's come forward. So this suggests two people that are bonded together somehow in a secret or some kind of emotional dynamic but they have different psychologies and different feelings about what happened.
Here is the forensic logic. The first note demanded money. The second note provided an excuse for why the victim might not survive, effectively destroying any leverage the first note created. A rational co-conspirator focused on money would be furious at the second note's author. So why was it written? Dr. Brucato's conclusion. There is a rupture happening inside the group between the psychopathic psychology and the emotionally overwhelmed one. Two people bonded by a secret but now at odds, one wanting to distance herself from what happened. He believes this rupture should have been exploited.
Well, let's put it this way. If it was a complete coincidence and she just decided to do that on her own, which is entirely possible, I don't think she could have done a better job of phrasing it in the way that one would advise her to do, right? Because what I think she did there was very similar to what you would do if, let's say, you had, I don't know, a couple or friends or whatever that you think were involved together in some kind of deed. You have to rupture them. Well, what you do is you isolate one of them and you say something like, look, I think you had no taste for this. I think that you got caught up in this because you were scared. I think you got pressured into this. I think you're a little scared of this person, I think that, etc. And you kind of give the person an opportunity to kind of come forward and say, look, this is what motivated this, but I really didn't want this to go so far. And now I'm scared and everything is because one of the people in the story is usually more cruel and psychopathic, and one is just sort of sucked into it and goes along with it. And you have to break that person away from the nastier character. And I think that
Savannah Guthrie's recent video message, in which she spoke directly to someone with a specific and carefully worded appeal, aligned almost perfectly with this exploitation strategy. Dr. Brucato noted that she isolated the person who may feel regret, the one who got caught up in something they didn't fully intend. She gave them a psychological off-ramp. The message, whether coordinated with law enforcement or purely instinctive, was a precise instrument designed to fracture an alliance.
It's bothering me that, you might think you did something. There's nothing you could have done, that kind of thing. I understand the idea of legal distancing, but why take the risk to send that if some emotion wasn't overwhelming you? And when you're overwhelmed by emotion, just a little bit of pressure, you could pop because you're looking for relief. Problem is those notes for a long time ago, and this message from Savannah is coming now. So I was fascinated by it because it wasn't long after, I've been talking about these notes. I said to myself, boy, I wish I would have said something earlier. Maybe I could have given somebody the idea a long time ago, but I think it's just a coincidence that someone had the same idea, you know what I mean? But it would have been helpful probably.
So when you saw her message, it does seem to kind of play into your theory of there could be multiple people and she's trying to pull one of them away from the other, pull the sympathetic one away from the other.
The problem, as Dr. Brucato identifies, is timing. The notes were written months ago. The emotional window may have narrowed, but his core insight remains fear is the tool to use against a person with an intact conscience. Repetition, the steady drumbeat of facts pointing closer to a specific door, is what creates the pressure. The person who wrote the second note is, in his words, having real feelings. That is the fissure.
Pressure on that individual to finally say, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to throw everybody else under the bus. I need redemption. I need closure. I need to not be afraid of the law.
Yeah,
and they will get caught.
You talk about pressure. If you were advising the FBI, so she did this video last week. What now? What do you do now? I mean, should she keep doing targeted videos? Does it just need to be, you need to be pounding this person so they can't ignore it? Or do you take a break what do you do next?
Well, if let's say, for example, there is somebody or some little group of people that they are secretly aware might be involved, but they're keeping their mouth shut and kind of keeping them on a long lead. I think you say so. You say, listen, we're not going to be specific here, but we've got our eye on who this is, and we're pretty confident. And this is your chance to say something before you're charged, that kind of thing.
The criminal case is not cold. DNA technology is advancing. Investigative genetic genealogy is ongoing, though the current leads have been ruled out. The hair found at the scene yielded no usable profile, but the civil case is now furnishing a different kind of evidence. Sworn allegations that describe a department that may have allowed the pressure of this high-profile disappearance to generate a target rather than a suspect. The same department whose sheriff now says nobody is ruled out.
Full arrest and seizure of Carlos Palazuelos and Daniel Maddox, and the search of their family property that resulted in significant property damage. Remember, they went through the house, they got the cell phones, they were I think they tore down a couple of doors, that kind of thing. It says on February 10th, 2026, deputies of the Pima County Sheriff's Office arrested Carlos at gunpoint and held him without probable cause for approximately 7 to 8 hours. Carlos's arrest was made in a public fashion and that intended to damage Carlos's reputation and subject him to humiliation and suspicion by implicating Carlos in the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie. The PCSD carried out the arrest.
This brings us full circle. The notice of claim filed by Carlos Palazuelos is a publicly available document. It is not under seal. Unlike the search warrant affidavits, you can read the exact language yourself. It details a timeline where a traffic stop, a home raid, a SWAT detention, and a social media announcement all occurred within hours, and where, months later, the subject of that raid has still not been charged, but also has not been cleared. The paperwork already knew.
Angles that I'm working on for next week, and I can't believe it's been 6 months. Many ways it doesn't feel that long at all. My heart goes out to the Guthrie family, to Savannah Guthrie. I can't even imagine. You can just see the pain in her eyes when she does those videos. And if you watch the Today Show, you kind of just think, oh, she's doing well and she's, back to work. But it's pretty obvious that behind the scenes, this is something that she's still dealing with every single day. And the people in Tucson are too. I was just back in Nancy's neighborhood this week, and the neighbors are still really on edge that there's been so little progress in terms of solving the case. So I'll stay on it. I appreciate everybody for watching and continuing to be interested.
What sits in the gap between nobody is completely ruled out and a civil claim for $2.5 million alleging a baseless arrest? The answer is in the sealed warrants, the unsealed claims, and the publicly available words of the sheriff. Those documents together do not yet prove what happened to Nancy Guthrie. They do begin to prove something else. How an investigation under extreme pressure can produce collateral damage that outlasts any headline. 6 months in, a family is still waiting, and at least 2 other families are now suing. The question to ask in the comments is simple: read the notice of claim linked in the description, and tell me whether the department's silence serves the search for the truth or the search for a scapegoat. I'll see you there.